Welcome to this new idea. I am your host, Conrad Meyers. I'm happy to be bringing this episode to you from Vallejo, California, in my little studio of my rented house. And I'm super happy to be welcoming my guest, J.K. Fowler, artist, writer, executive director, and advocate for the arts in Oakland. How are you, J.K.?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's all so weird, and I have this show which gives me an outrageous amount of joy.
It is so weird, and I have you up on YouTube.
Oh, great.
And we're like, there's a lot going on.
Yes. Oh, so you're making sure that it's active. Maybe, yeah, and also you'll be available to answer questions if people tune in and wanna chat
Oh,
about
for
it.
sure. Yeah.
So, you have kept I've just been watching from afar, and I've just been seeing how busy you've kept with moving the constant events of Nomadic Press to online. And you did it really quickly. Like, I remember thinking, "Holy moly, he just moved right into that." The disruption that this caused, the seamlessness with which you moved Nomadic Press into dealing with this new paradigm. Do you feel like that seamlessness has happened in your personal work, in your writing? Or
No,
did it just
no, I do not.
knock it up?
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, it was such an intense period at the beginning of the year, and when all of that when it started to become real, in like February. I think it was like February where it really like hit the road, and we're like, oh, this is the real deal. COVID is here to stay.
Yeah.
And I think out of that, it really was like the space. We couldn't use the space anymore. We did an event at City Lights, and that was kind of our last live event.
Uh-huh.
And even that one, the pit of my stomach was like, this isn't right. Like, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And so after that, I was like, okay, we gotta do this. Like, and so we started we did the virtual open mic,
Uh-huh.
which we started specifically for COVID.
Uh-huh.
And that was amazing because it had been like weeks and weeks before we'd like seen people's faces.
Yeah.
And we met kind of being in community with each other. So that was really cool. We've been doing that now 14 straight weeks.
Yeah.
So it was 14 weeks now ago that we started doing all this.
Wow.
And then the monthly shows were kind of like on the horizon. And at that time, we were like, with everyone else, we weren't sure if this was going to be like over in a week,
Right.
if this was like over in a few weeks. And the timeline just kind of expanded as time went on. So we realized we just need to move everything online, and so we moved Get Lit online, we moved Speaking Natural Loading online. As far as my personal work goes, like, I find it hard to do that just in regular times, which you can probably relate to. So yeah, now, it's really strange, and I got this funding from the Cultural Affairs Department of the City of Oakland
Uh-huh.
to write this book that we can dip into and meander about.
Sure.
But it's about space. It's about making space, right?
Yeah.
And of course, back then when I had written it, I wasn't considering like virtual space,
Uh-huh.
Particularly for our events. But now I have to do definitely a huge addition
Right.
to it, and then some revising of the past in thinking through physical space. So yeah, so the book is called Making Space, and the subtitle is The Art of Centering at the moment, and it kind of tackles publishing and events.
Okay.
And so what does it mean to make space both within the publishing industry but also like on the page?
Right.
And then what does it mean to like actually make space for people to like exist in, to perform in, to gather in, and of course now that includes Zoom. So
Right.
maybe I can get like corporate funding from Zoom to like add them in.
Yeah, we Aggregate made a run at a California Arts Council grant to try to teach. The idea behind the grant that we were applying for was to try to teach aging artists and artists that are less comfortable with technology, connecting them with artists that are very comfortable with technology, and using that grant money to basically like help people through this process and to move their practice from what they considered to be an only physical experience to the possibilities of a virtual one.
Right.
And so
and that's so important too, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm so impressed with some of like the older folks that are in our community.
Yeah.
They'll join a Zoom call, no problem. I'm like, I don't think I would be able to do that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, like I was just telling you with the episode of this that got all mucked up by a small programming change, and it just completely threw me off, and wasn't able to be solved in short order. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably there's people that are very used to it, and then I think there's other people that I think what we were imagining with the grant was really how do we. Which we didn't get the grant, so that's I can talk about it like even more fully now. Is how do you take people that think that their practice can't possibly exist virtually and help them find a path through the multitude of options that there are to make that happen.
Right.
And I think about the aggregate space that was at 801 West Grand. I probably would have kept the programming going. Like we would have just opened up the roll-up door and not let people in, but just treated it like a diorama. Like we could have gotten away with a whole lot of stuff. Whereas the Noodle Factory space is a little bit more confined, doesn't have the kind of epic street access that the 801 building had. So we've just frozen up. But we're aggregate in particular is we're moving forward with trying to figure out ways to just turn some of the stuff that we were doing into more public art. And so it's similar. I mean, the space making that you're speaking of is more specifically like setting aside space for art projects, setting aside space for unshined upon artists. Like what's the
so I mean, it probably comes as no surprise to most folks that publishing is traditionally a white industry and has been for many, many years. And I think that there's a lot of levers that and processes that are built in intentionally to make it a really opaque, confusing process. Right. And so like when I was starting, I didn't grow up saying I want to be a publisher. That's not really kind of where my drive the press project comes from. But once I dipped in, I was like, wow, this is really unnecessarily confusing and extremely old, like just ancient. Like some of these structures are just like really old and ancient and dusty and like do not ruff a vibe of like vitality and life and so the book, the hope with the book is it is like there's kind of like dip-ins that are a little bit philosophical. I'm a big fan of Yi-Fu Chuan's books like Space and Place, Passing Strange. Like I don't know if you're familiar, but really amazing thinker and professor, and then it has really like nuts and bolts stuff. Like here's an example royalty structure. Like here's how you can buy a barcode in an ISBN.
Right.
Like here's what a distribution network looks like. Here's how you design a book. Here's how you print it. Like, and stuff about CMYK and like shit that nobody, the books on it are really convoluted and not fun reads. And like, so the hope with this is that it gives folks some tools to start publishing themselves.
Wow, that's great.
And as an author, I really want authors also to understand what they're getting into. Because I think one of the biggest travesties is that most publishers will not educate the author on the process. And I mean, for me, one of the biggest sticking points is the royalty structure. So imagine this, like you spend years, like if it's your first book, you've probably spent like 3, 4, 5 years more,
Yeah.
maybe your entire life you've spent like
16. Yeah. Right.
and then you publish it, and your royalties are generally at like 10%. And that can either be gross or net, and usually it's net.
Uh-huh.
So that's 10% after all the costs have been taken off. And so unless you're like a J.K. Rowling
Yeah.
or like, Stephen King, and you're just like like you're in airports, you're in the bathrooms of the airports, you're like, it's going to be really hard to make any money, right? But who is making a lot of money is the publisher.
Yeah.
And so with the big houses, they're giving these, they'll give advances on the royalties to authors. So, an author might get 10K or 100K, or it depends on the book and the author, but they'll get this upfront money, but then it's an advance. So it's an advance on the royalties that are expected to come from your book.
Got it.
So they deduct it from your initial royalties until the advance is gone. And so if you're a new author and you're, with a small publisher like Nomadic Press, and it's a weird relationship because the publisher takes your book, publishes it, ideally gets it out into the world as much as possible.
Uh-huh.
And the publisher is encountering all of these costs as well, right? So like the distributors take anywhere from 20 to 50% of each sale.
Wow.
And so it's like by the end of the cycle, you're just left with crumbs.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're trying to break that initial structure that we adopted, which kind of industry standard.
Uh-huh.
And we're upping everyone's base royalties to 20%. The eventual goal is to be at 50%, right? Because that just feels kind of like a good relationship.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's like, how do you get to 50% and stay in business? So that's the,
Right.
So like we're going to 20% as of tomorrow, actually. And so we'll be able to integrate that. But then like, how do we change the structures, the internal structures to get to a 50%, right?
Yeah. So
when we're talking about like ebooks are easier because it cuts out the distribution, it cuts out the print costs, it cuts out a lot of that. And so we're doing 50% on that. So that's good.
Yeah.
But it really gets you thinking about, there's a lot of things that I want to do with the project that would really help put a lot of these pieces in-house. So, like, if you think about, if we could print and bind our own books, if we could build out our own distribution network.
Right.
It's like owning the means of production, right? It's like
a
classic.
Yeah.
And that all costs a lot of capital, right? So, like a binder for a book, a machine costs new, like $80,000.
Yeah.
Which is a drop in the bucket for the big publishers, but the big publishers are using like machines that can do like thousands of books an hour.
Yeah.
And usually they're outsourcing to China, Indonesia, Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you're talking about like, cents.
Yeah.
You're printing tens of thousands of books at like 10 cents each or 20 cents each or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
So it's just it's an insane industry, especially now in COVID, when those supply chains, like we just kind of watch them crumble, right?
Yeah.
And that includes things like printing books in China and then having them shipped over on a ship that takes like 2 weeks. It's just a crazy system. Like, how is that? So we print locally in Oakland and we pay a ton more.
Right.
But it's local and it's literally going back into our community. And and the more that we print with them, the better the pricing. so we grow together.
Yeah.
And
That's
that just
amazing.
feels good. Like I want to be able to sleep at night
Yeah.
and not feel like I'm exploiting labor in China
Yeah.
or like, all these things.
That's
And it's hard.
that's more than a lot. Well, yeah. I mean, that's more than a lot of people can make happen. I think similarly. It's funny that our paths to our nonprofits are similar. It seems because it was similar for me to just look around and identify that like not only aren't the stories that I want to see being told, but they're not being told properly by people with resources, and like they're not I mean, in the most particular case, like, video installations by emerging artists, almost all are terrible because the technology is expensive.
Right.
And the people that are doing it, that's not their expertise. So
Yeah.
it became like a really fun, like it was born out of injustice, but then became like how do we solve this really efficiently so
Yeah.
that we're doing as much as we can for the smallest possible amount of our expenditures,
Yeah.
and then how do we get some people on board with that idea
Right.
that's a good idea.
I feel like the poetry world was not. And there was some virtual stuff going on, but it definitely was not like the medium that poetry or writing was using to get the works out, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder about, like, do you feel like kind of your work and the work that Aggregate does, like, that seems like that's just has been a natural fit for the virtual, and I know that, like, video work, I don't know, how does that change your perception of the work?
That's it. That's a really good question. I still really struggle with it, and I'm anxiously still quite against experiencing art on computer screens. I think for me, and this is like not this is not even Aggregate's view. Technically, this is my personal view. It's like I appreciate the space being set aside for that intellectual pursuit. I like to walk through a door. I like all of the activities and of getting there, of taking my body to a new place, entering that new space, following that new space's rules, and kind of shedding all of the weight that's on me that I've gathered throughout the day or throughout the week, and like that, the action of like moving into a new space just like allows you to be present.
Right.
And so I have trouble. And it's funny because like it doesn't bother me at all. Like if we have a video show and it has 9 videos in it, if somebody spends 10 minutes walking through and I know that there's 2 hours of content, it doesn't bother me. But the thought of somebody doing that at home bothers me. Like that somebody would like go onto YouTube and start watching the video and be like, "This is boring. I'm going to turn it off." That bothers me because it's like, yeah, right. And I think it bothers me because it's just a different thing. Like even if somebody doesn't get anything out of or doesn't appreciate the work that they went to see it, and that action, like it tells me that they're willing to put a part of their mind and focus that on culture that is outside of them. Whereas I think there's so many distractions when you're in front of your computer. And maybe it's just because I'm a distracted person and I know that I can't effectively.
I don't know, because I hear you on that. I like obviously, like, I really appreciate physical space, and I spend a lot of time in the book writing about it, like how to make it, with wood and flowers and like spacing and audio and like all the things that kind of make space.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that, and the way I've described virtual space is like, let's stop thinking about it in as if they're in opposition to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and like let's think of them as like, I mean, they're just so compatible in different ways. Like,
Yeah.
I know for me, there are just days more often than not where I'm just like, I don't want to leave my house, especially now, but like before COVID.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And this allows me to participate in a way that, at first it was hella awkward because not all of us, like I had used Zoom before, but like not all of us had, and it was this kind of weird thing. Like, what do we do? We clap? Do we not clap? Do we look at ourselves? Do we look at others? Like, the whole thing. And it just complements it because we're able to participate in the comfort of our own homes or offices, sitting on our couch, sitting in the living room, sitting at the dining room.
Uh-huh.
And I think that matters too. Like, we bring our own spaces with us via our presentation to the outside world.
Yes.
Via clothing and gait and like our voice, and that we kind of carry our space out into the world, into other space, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of like allows others and ourselves to stay connected to our comfort space, right? Like our kind of the thing that we would be bringing out into the world anyway.
Yes.
But there's something really cool about seeing people's contexts, like where they emerge from,
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. And for us, for writing, the chat feature is amazing. For our virtual open mics, we do a found poem. And so as people hear lines that they appreciate, they drop them in the chat. And at the end of the night, we have like a found poem.
So great.
So there's stuff with text-based art that I think is really cool in virtual space too.
Yeah. I mean, those are legitimate arguments, but I think again, my hold back is particularly like sculpture and video work, particularly video work that requires scale, which is what Aggregate specialized in. Is the stuff that like doesn't really work on a phone-sized image, but when you're eye to eye with a human figure that's bigger than you,
right?
That has just a much different effect, and I think that's going to be tough to replicate. And we're thinking through some things, and we're kind of figuring out what the plan is for programming. And we'll have a show for sure by the end of the year that will just have a lot of restrictions, most likely, of how people enter the space and be in it, and how many people can do that at a time. I mean, we're lucky because it's a very large space.
Yeah.
And so we'll be able to, we can maintain social distancing guidelines and still have 30 people in there, probably.
I think we should make masks that have there's like a double purpose. Like, one is to protect us from corona, but the other is it's like a feeding trough.
Yeah.
That's built into the mask, so that we can wear our mask and just like munch on stuff while we go to a club.
Or it's a flap for a straw. So there was an artist at SFAI a few years ago in the graduate program that did this brilliant piece where they made these goggles that just had a screen facing out that had a video of somebody else's eyes.
Oh,
and so you'd put them on and you couldn't see anything, but it looked like you could see everything. And it was just that. And there were some, like, performances, but also you could just put one on in the installation. And it was just so compelling because you lose your ability to see, but everybody else feels like you still can. And it's just such a silly act. I wish I could remember the artist's name. It's kind of embarrassing. But it's like that, right? It's like I saw an old lady with a skeleton jaw mask on at the I think it might have been Costco or something this past week, and I just wanted to tell her it was great, and I chickened out. But it was like she was like she's like 4'9", probably like pushing 80 with this somebody like one of her grandkids gave it to her or something, or she's totally cool. But yeah, I mean, like, what is I look forward to seeing, artists solving these problems. Like, how do you, like, there's already, I think somebody was talking about, there was an artist that put pictures of, it was for first responders, for doctors and nurses, having a picture of their face that they would print on their mask. So it's like you'd send them, like the doctor would send them a picture of their face, and then they would send them back a mask that had the bottom half of their face on it.
Right. Yeah.
And so that they're
so that permanent smiles.
Yeah, exactly. So and it wouldn't feel so sad and jarring, particularly for the people like in deep trouble that haven't seen somebody's face in a few days. You know, like
it could be really disorienting if it was like slightly off. You know, and those looks like kind of like a slightly tilted smile.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what this doctor or nurse is up to. I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure I trust their intentions here.
There was a special effect guy that did one. It was like a hat, the circular compartment on like a World War I gas mask.
Uh-huh.
He had sculpted what looked like his mouth, holding that in his mouth, and that was his mask. You can find it online, and it's really spectacular. You just go grocery shopping, and it just like is this like horrifying cartoon version of. But you know, I mean, I think like those challenges, like as horrible as all this is, like that's what erupts out of these sorts of things, like.
Yeah.
That bubbling over of creativity that happens when people are looking to make fun of something. I mean I can't get over it. It was just this morning the Aunt Jemima headline that the Onion made a joke about it 8 hours before. Did you see that? The Twitter of like
a couple days ago, I think.
Yeah, or I mean, like the genius behind that, like calling that like that's how people that's how corporations are going to deal with this. They're going to make non-apologetic quick changes to things that have been problematic forever.
But you read today that they actually did, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but that's what's so funny is that the Onion like called it. These
are strange times. I mean, like I feel like those kind of creative solutions popped up almost immediately.
Yeah.
As Corona kind of became real and people stopped investing in physical space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hella interested in like how we transcend the virtual to hold space like together.
Yeah.
Over the course of these past few months, it's significantly shifted for me in the sense of like being able to see and gauge other people's energy and like being able to kind of hold that, hold the space in a way that you would, I feel like, be able to pick up on much quicker in a physical space.
Yes.
Like folks talk about how our bodies have kind of a 3-foot radius of energy, right?
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's so cool, because we're also talking about 6 feet, and that's 2 radiuses of 3 feet.
Yeah.
That we have to keep distance, right? Before we're like in each other's sphere.
Yeah.
And I think there's a beauty in language, but also kind of how we hold our bodies in virtual space that allows us to transcend the cables and the screens and everything and be together.
Yeah. Well, you forget about it.
Huh?
I mean, you forget about it. I mean, not to interrupt complete your thought, but like, I mean, even just now, like, where I am starts to fall away.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm sure that it happens to. I mean, I know that it happens to me when I watch stuff like this or when I listen to podcasts. Like, if you're
that's a cool idea. It is. It's the kind of like melting away of the frame or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like.
Well, it's
cool because when we're physically together, we're not. We're not like holding hands with the poets as they read.
Right.
So they're still in our virtual frame. Like they're still kind of like, and there's all this other stuff going on, but similar, there's a lot of stuff going on here too.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll get better at it. I mean, it's sensory fatigue, right? It's like not feeling the pants on your body or not seeing your eyeglass edges, unless you start to think about it, or not seeing the tip of your nose, which we can all see, but our brains have edited out of our absorption process of the environment.
Right.
But I think it'll just become that, you'll be able to like focus in. I mean, our eyes are made for this. Like we're able to generate extreme focus and really dissolve everything else away.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's really exciting to think about. I like that.
Yeah, and I feel like there was something, especially in the beginning for me, of all of this that, I was so attached to the physical space. Like, it was really important for me to be, for like the space I live in to be a particular way,
Mm-hmm.
not like anally clean or anything, just kind of like, just comfortable. Like,
Uh-huh.
and it was really important for our spaces, for readings and stuff, to feel the same way, just comfortable. Like, again, things that compose a home,
Right.
for us, and that was gone.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, so like, how do we do that when we can't do that? Like, how does that transcend the virtual, and like, how do we? And so if you see my background, like, I've learned to include it
Uh-huh.
in my background, and I know others, like, I've seen others' backgrounds evolve drastically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like, in the beginning, there was like, this is like a shower curtain, and then this was like there's some weird shit in the background.
Yeah.
And then people, I think, realize the power of the frame, right? Like, how we're perceived, and kind of where we're presenting from. And people are like really into lighting now, which I really appreciate. Lighting's so, I mean, I know you understand lighting is like everything, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's still some people that sign on and that they're like hella washed out. It's like really bright.
Right. Yeah.
But it's cool to watch the evolution, because I think people are getting it.
Yeah.
More and more. Like, these things that they're just so important to our environments. Like plants and wood, like softness and light and like color, and I don't know, I appreciate where I see things going.
That's wonderful. When did you feel like it set in that you were going to have to change your book? I know that kind of takes us a bunch of steps back, but that idea of when were you like, oh, I get oh really?
No, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, probably.
Mm.
Because I feel like what's setting in for me is the realization that this is, you know how it's been, like, there's just been waves of realization.
Yeah, definitely.
And the last one was, I was like, okay, like, this isn't, not only is this not going to change soon, but this is like fundamentally altering our conceptions of space.
Yeah.
I think on the shadow side, what I was really concerned about, and I guess I still am, is this framing of space as dangerous, and because it has the virus,
Right.
And especially in the beginning of all of this, the perception of others as, the danger, right? Like,
Possibly, yeah.
and I'm like, shit, like, America needs another other to add to its list of others for what to be afraid of, or who to be afraid of. And especially with the folks that are, what's the term? They're not showing symptoms, they're asymptomatic.
Yes.
So that in the beginning was like, that was super scary, right? That was like, oh, you could be talking to your dad and like not even know that you had it.
Right.
And then you'd kill your dad.
It's invasion of the body snatchers.
Invasion of the body snatchers, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it became really crazy there for a second. I feel like that's died down a little bit. I mean, America's great at forgetting things, especially bad things.
Yes.
Especially if America did them.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's starting to already happen.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see. I don't know what's going to happen. So the book is holding physical space as it was, but also like showing some influence from this virtual moment. And then there's literally just going to be a section on virtual space.
That's great.
And that'll be like nuts and bolts. How do you secure a Zoom call?
Yeah.
So you don't get Zoom bombed, you know.
Which you guys got aggressively attacked early on, right?
Yeah, twice. So the beginning, the first one was the first virtual Get Lit we did. And it was just the musician and I. And there were like 15 people that joined at once. And they were fine. Like, they're actually friendly. And then tides turned.
Oh, man.
Real quick. Yeah. So we kicked them out and closed the meeting and then reopened it. But, yeah, it's been a lot. There's been a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Around the security of virtual space.
Yeah. For me as well. You know,
like we pay rent for physical space.
Yeah.
Has also become like a really crazy idea.
Well, I'm sorry. Isn't that a crazy idea?
For me, it's just become a really crazy idea. Like just the idea of even paying rent for physical space. Like,
I mean, land ownership is insane. Right. I mean, I'm not a crazy person, but having one person own land and one person not owning land is crazy.
Yeah.
On Earth. Like,
it is.
We all came out of a uterus. Like,
okay.
It's crazy. Most money things are crazy, but like, my living situation's changed pretty drastically in the last couple of weeks, and I'm digging deeper into like what does it mean to try to go down that path, which I had pretty much, I wouldn't say gave up on, but I gave up on like pulling off before I'm 50, and now I'm like trying to turn and figure out like how the hell do I lock in something. Right. You know, and or just guarantee a future for myself and my family, which is like,
right.
See, it seems like a no-brainer, something I would have done decades ago, but like other priorities popped up, like saving that space for 300 other people. Like.
Right. But we also exist. I mean, we exist in the Bay Area, which is just, it's all absurd, and the Bay Area is just like absurd times 20.
Yeah.
Or what? I don't know if it's, I mean, it still kind of is. I don't know what's happening with it. I don't know.
I can't.
Rent going to drop, and I don't know.
Yeah, rent's dropping. I mean, that's the one thing. Like, all of my advisors are telling me, do not buy anything. Like, anybody I ask, it's like, don't buy anything. Wait, like several months. It's probably going to tank.
Yeah.
But I know. I mean, I really don't want to move. Like I'm trying to like weigh like how much is it going to cost to move again when I just moved a year ago. Like, we just got settled like during COVID.
Right.
I felt like I was in my house rather than in this confusing place in a strange city. You know, and now it's like, well, let's just figure where we're going to go now. Are we going to go further away? Are we going to double down and like go back to Oakland and hope that works out? But know that it likely won't, because it's the tide.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think that just gets all tied up in these thoughts about like moving forward, and I was thinking about, so when I kind of bugged you about like things you'd like to address, you talked about revising your book. You talked about virtual space a bit. You said something else that I'm blanking on now, that I wanted to address, but we can skip. Do you recall what your couple of things are that you threw out in that email?
This is again the beauty of the virtual space.
That's right. It looks like you're totally just looking off screen, thinking. It doesn't look like you're reading an email at all.
Just what does it mean to make space on the page and within the publishing industry?
Yeah.
Family, living room, community, plants, wood, the aesthetics of home.
Yeah.
And I feel like something that came up when you were just talking is like, this really feels like a moment where we're, a lot of us have seen the scaffolding, of this society before, but it really is showing itself right now, and it feels like a lot of a lot of that is quaking, and it's time for renewal, and there's
Right.
just things being thrown out, and I think that I feel like the more that we can be closer to reality and less aspirational
Right.
about who we are as humans and like who we are as a society of humans meshed together.
Yeah.
I just feel like the more movement we can make on solid foundations rather than these like delusional thoughts of like democracy and freedom or shit like that.
Oh man.
Or like
Yeah. Yes.
so like why don't so I feel like the scaffolding it has been shaking for a long time, and that COVID is really like this moment where it's like we're just sick of the bullshit.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more that we can educate ourselves on the past processes as we have been,
Uh-huh.
the more that we can like renew and rebuild and dream in these moments of renewal, right? And it's such a cool moment because it's global.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And that's such a cool thing to be living through, even though it's terrifying.
I'm going to read this quote. So you gave a better lead-in than I ever could have. So I've been occasionally quoting on this show from Brian Greene's Fabric of the Cosmos, which is a book that explains experimental physics and string theory and stuff. But there's this section in this book that talks about time and how physics doesn't explain time appropriately to how humans interact with it. And I've like looked back. I must have reread this section of this book like 100 times, and for whatever reason, it applies so much to what I think a lot of people are going through right now. And so I've got this quote of it's in the section called Time and Experience, and it's right as he's starting to introduce the idea of time flowing and time's arrow, which again don't really have a mathematical based description. They are things that we experience, and we must agree don't really exist, which is he spends like many pages trying to explain. But this section here, and it just like ties into what you just said, where it's like we must make predictions based on the past, but it's against the nature of the way our mind is built. And I hopefully we can talk after I finished it. Okay, so our experiences also teach us that there is an apparent lopsidedness to how things unfold in time. There is no use crying over spilled milk, because once spilled, it can never be unspilled. We never see splattered milk gather itself together, rise off the floor, and coalesce in a glass that sets itself upright on a kitchen counter. Our world seems to adhere perfectly to a one-way temporal arrow, never deviating from the fixed stipulation that things can start like this and end like that, but then they can never start like that and end like this. Our experiences, therefore, teach us two overarching things about time. First, time seems to flow. It's as if we stand on the riverbank of time as the mighty current rushes by, sweeping the future towards us, becoming now at the moment it reaches us, and rushing onward as it recedes downstream into the past. Or, if that is too passive for your taste, invert the metaphor. We ride the river of time as it relentlessly rushes forward, sweeping us from one now to the next, as the past recedes with the passing scenery, and the future forever awaits us downstream. Second, time seems to have an arrow. The flow of time seems to go one way and only one way, in the sense that things happen in one and only one temporal sequence. If someone hands you a box containing a short film of glass milk being spilled, but the film has been cut up into individual frames, by examining the pile of images, you can reassemble the frames into the right order without any help or instruction from the filmmaker. Time seems to have an intrinsic direction pointing from what we call the past towards what we call the future, and things appear to change. Spilled milk spills, eggs break, candles burn, people age in universal alignment with this direction. And I think what what gets me about that, and like what I want to challenge in it, is why do we strive to change that? Like, why do we strive to better our democratic processes? Why do we strive for a situation where the milk, like, why do we invent things that, for example, if I knock over, doesn't spill the milk? Like, why do we try to stop it? Like, if inevitability is part of the equation, what are we trying to revise with it constantly, always? Especially creative people and scientists and researchers.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. What came up for me is so a few things came up. I like that quote.
Okay.
I think that what's interesting is if someone hands you a box, right? Let's use one of the examples that he uses.
Yeah.
It sort of gets back to our frame discussion in the beginning, around how if we lose sight of the frame, there just seems to be a continual flow, right? We kind of lose track of ourselves in the matrix, and we participate, and
that's right.
We're just moving, and we're just living our lives. I think the power of mindfulness, right? Mm-hmm. Or moments of mindfulness, or moments of presentness, is its insane ability to disrupt time.
Yes.
Right? And so, like, someone hands me a box, and if I become intently aware of the feeling of the box and the weight of the box and just how the box kind of shifts in my hands, and there's like all these layers that suddenly time is distorting, and you're dipping like into this box experience, and you're no longer participating in the sequence as it was laid out. Like, right. You're somewhere else. You're like down at point Z when there was an XY axis or something. I don't know what the you know what I mean? But it's like you dip into these little holes where time dips and twists and and lives differently.
Right.
And I know for myself, when I get stuck on it's such a hard thing, because we like to say, this is a cup, and there's water in the cup, and like if the water falls out, there's no water in the cup, right? And it's like, that's kind of how we live our life. And it's super cliche, but like, there is no water, there is no cup, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
There really isn't. There really isn't. So we've made up these differentiations to get through our daily lives.
Yes.
And within these moments, there's like these little wormholes that we experience life differently. And I feel like Corona, to bring it back to our friend, the Rona, it has created these crazy time warps. I don't know if you've experienced this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's come up a bunch of times in this show.
Yeah. Like a day has been like a week.
Yes.
And then a week has been like an hour. And it's like none of it doesn't make sense. Like, it should be one or the other, but it's both somehow.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, go ahead. I just was going to say, I've come off, this might be a good lead-in for what you were about to say, which is like, I just came off the busiest, like, 12 months of my whole life, like, by far, no exception. Like, I was averaging probably 6 hours of sleep a night, and like eating a meal a day, and I destroyed my body, like gained 20 pounds, lost 40, like everything was all over the place. And many magical things happened, like to myself personally. Many terrible things happened to, the things I support, the people I love. And here we are. And when this all started, I was in a period of extremely high anxiety. And so when this launched, I didn't know where to put my time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to use it. And so I used it to try to just like catch, like there was this long mental list of things to improve my life that I just immediately moved into. Like, I got to clean this. I got to organize that. I got to fix that thing. I have to dig that hole. I have to do this project. I have to read that book. I have to, respond to those 40 emails. It was like all these things, and that became ongoing and filled up my schedule and became a reward in of itself. And it makes me question, like, what the hell was I doing? How was I so busy and not accomplishing any of these things? And now I'm still just as busy, but I'm only doing things that I just didn't accomplish before, but yet everything was okay. And I feel like this whole situation makes me question what really needs to be done for me. Like, what are the things that I absolutely must be accomplishing if this level of accomplishment is so different than that level of accomplishment, and it still feels equivalently full and sometimes equally anxiety ridden. But
it's such a trip.
Right, but
I think where I am is that I'm like comfortably at the point where none of it matters, and therefore, the choice to do during the day is a creative exercise, right? It's like there is no laundry list.
Yes,
and so it's like, what do I want to do today? And that's a luxury, right? I mean, that's such a luxury, and I recognize that. And also, I feel like, man, there's these opportunities. Like, what if what we build is built in a way that incorporates wormholes, if that makes sense, right? So, like, we're building things not like cement structures, but like malleable, mutable, like things that are naturally shifting and responding to their environments, right?
Yeah.
Including, that's like ideas. It's also like structures, like how do we rethink structures? It's also like processes, like publishing. What does that mean?
Yeah.
To kill a tree and turn it into a piece of paper and slap some glue on it, and the whole thing. And then we have the object. And then we're back at the box, right? It's like, especially with books, and I would say especially with poetry, but any genre.
Yeah.
That's a good box, because that you dip into that box. There's multiple entries, right?
Yeah.
Different pieces and different sentences and different lines, and like, so.
Yeah, right. So I've gotten really into audiobooks for the first time in my life because I want to keep doing physical things, but I actually have the mental space. Like, I've always been afraid to listen to that sort of thing because I need my mind space to plan the next week of things that need to get accomplished.
Yeah.
But when that starts to slow down, it was nice to, like, I'm going to absorb this person's thinking, or I'm going to absorb these stories. And I find myself anxious that I can't go back as easily, and I can't circle something. But also, it changes the way in which I'm absorbing the information. It becomes a far more ephemeral experience, like a performance or like a poetry reading, and less like a book or a film.
Yeah.
Where it's like I know that I'll never hear this again, or I'll never see this again. So I better at least be paying attention.
Yeah.
It
changes. On time, but it makes me think of
time doesn't exist here.
Time doesn't exist here, and yet I can't remember the writer. It may have been Baudrillard. It may have been, I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
I wouldn't dare.
It just makes me think of often, like, with our phones, or whatever, our cups or whatever, when we don't recognize or acknowledge their livingness, right?
Yeah.
And the co-communication that happens between human and object.
Yes.
And, like, I'm sitting in a chair right now, there's a shit ton happening right now between myself and the chair.
That's right.
And if
Yes.
it weren't happening, this shit would be different. Like I would be on the floor and it would be a mess.
Yes.
Um,
I love reversing the subject object relationship. Like I
yeah.
love it so much. This do you ever read Brian Masumi's Parables for the Virtual?
Yes, I did.
Oh
Yeah.
my sweet God. That section about the soccer ball still like sticks with me and I think about it all the time. So like for viewers that didn't read the like this insanely dense book by he was at Santa Cruz, right? Or no, he
Yeah, I
wasn't
think
at
so.
Santa Cruz. No, he just worked under Lisa Cartwright. Lisa Cartwright, is that right?
I can look at it while you talk because
Anyway, anyway, he
uh,
he has this section of the book where he talks about in a soccer match the subject is not the subject object relationship is different because the soccer ball controls all of the actions of everything that's going on, and
yeah,
that world is only active because the soccer ball is forcing people to kick it and forcing people to stop it and forcing itself out of bounds and forcing itself back into bounds and forcing cheers and forcing celebration and tragedy
yeah,
and it he spends like a few pages explaining this and it feels like you're reading another language
yeah,
because it's not the way your brain is trained. And I love that idea of like when the phone rings you act, it's not the other way
yeah.
around. Like that
Right,
is it is making you do that. And
right.
you're not like the person calling you isn't doing that, the phone is,
Yeah.
you know.
It's
And
like, yeah, it's an active, constantly evolving relationship. Like, and so your audiobooks make me think of that. It's
yeah,
like, we always say, I listened to an audiobook.
right,
But actually, the audiobook in many ways is listening to us, right? It's listening to what we want to read. It's listening to how we want to hear the book.
yes,
It's evolving based on us, right? So it's like it's a co-relationship. It's a co-creation, these moments. And then what I love about that and what I love about Masumi and others who have written on it is that similar to our experience of the box, it unlocks the innate magic in our world. Like it becomes magical to take a phone call.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yes,
Or it can. It can. Drinking water becomes this crazy thing where we've shaped a physical object to hold a liquid that apparently is good for us, and we're going to drink it. And like, it's
right. And in my
so
case,
it really,
yeah.
I love anything that decenters the human experience and recognizes it in our interconnectedness to both to each other, but also our objects, our space, right?
Yeah.
So we get back to space. So making space.
Yes. Right. But also just the idea that the universe is no matter what horseshit that humanity keeps trying to propose and present and apply, the universe moves on.
Yeah.
And things are still fickle and terrible and wonderful, but
Yeah.
really they happen whether people can try to stop them or not. Like they happen,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
feel like this I far smarter people are going to reassess what's happening right now than you or I possibly could. But
No. Yeah.
like America's not going to be the same after this.
I hope not. Yeah.
It can't possibly be. Like it really can't. Like I think it's either going to go all in on insanity or reject. I think a lot of gray is gonna have to pick a side in the next six
Yeah.
or 8 months, and we're gonna start to
Yeah.
find out like what are we doing? What are we capable of? Why are we allowing why are we allowing anti-intellectualism to really kill ourselves, and like that, just like the thing that you said earlier, the first thing that popped into my head was like, the people that aren't wearing masks right now, I'm immediately being like, you fucking idiot. And I can't, you know what I mean? Like it's becoming a signpost, like any other stereotype could be. And I'm not judging, I'm not judging if they forgot theirs or if they, you know, if if they're in an emergency situation and they don't have it with them. I'm judging like that they don't take this seriously, and then that's going to affect my friends and family and their families, and it's heavy.
It's heavy. These are crazy times, and like we exist in the gradations of shadow and light, and like there's still so much horror and magic like happening at the same time, and I appreciate co-creating with the virtual Conrad.
Yeah.
with this new idea.
Yeah, I mean, so this just to give you the background of this came to me. I teach. So for the second year in a row, I've taught this class at Mills, and it's with their book arts program. And every year they're the book arts MFA, and the first year cohort has to put an exhibition together every year, and I help them curate it, and that involves like talking to them about artist statements, talking to them about how to build an exhibition, how to promote an exhibition, all the exhibition related space creating things, but also like how do you work through collaboration, conceiving of something that's outside of your practice, working through all these things. And it went digital, you know, whatever. I think Mills canceled the class that first week of March, or first week of COVID, which was like the third week of March. And it just became this really wonderful conversation that I had with them via, I think, Google Hangouts. And it just felt like, this is what I remember feeling like, this is what I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss just talking through challenges and thinking through paths. And these are the things that I do with strangers on a regular basis because of public events and because of the way I've designed my social life. That's going to be gone.
Yeah.
And I just started thinking about how do I get that back in a way that maybe can entice some people that also appreciate these sorts of conversations. So thank you, viewers. There are a few of you that are watching this live. Thank you for making this feel worth it for me and for J.K.
Cool. Thanks, Conrad. I appreciate this. This is fun.
Yeah, I hope to God we talk sooner than the gap. I hope the gap between our next conversation is way shorter than the gap between now and our last conversation.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right.
All right. Well, stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.
You too, man. See ya.
All right. Bye.
It's always nice to take a little breath after a conversation when it reaches a crescendo like that one. Thank you for joining me with J.K. Fowler this week on this new idea. I think our next episode, if we're lucky, is going to actually be a live conversation between myself and Kathy Lou, who tentatively has agreed to come up to Vallejo and sit in my backyard and sit 6 feet away from me and have a conversation. So there may be technical snafus and all sorts of other exciting things. And it may not happen. We might just do it virtually. But if we do it live, it will be a first for this show. And as we're creeping up on what I imagine is the end of the 0 season, it will be something to celebrate. So I hope you tune in Monday evening. Currently scheduled at 5 p.m., but that may slightly change. So if you want to keep your eye out, subscribe to this new idea on YouTube. Tell all those that you love and that love brief art-related, vaguely philosophical conversations about what it means to create, about what this show means to you. And I will see you next time on this new idea. Thank you very much.